Welcome, friends. I am delighted to welcome everybody here for this installment of our series on aging. I am very happy to introduce George Schaefer, who is a member and clerk of the Abington meeting, as well as the Aging Concerns Coordinator for Philadelphia Yearly Meeting. So welcome to a conversation on spirituality and aging. Thank you, George.
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon, friends. The continuity of staying connected to one's spiritual values as one ages, the issue of anxiety, of how will you deal with loss, the issue of depression and grief. When does grief become depression? How to recognize it as such, how to seek out help, how to find clearness, if you will, for seeking good treatment. Those issues are all, they're all very relevant. And the way that we have framed that is to think of that, the idea of conscious aging. So religion has to face the worst that ever happens to people. Like other crises, these moments may make for a new discovery. The continuing enjoyment of experience is only possible when we accept our life situation as it is and exert ourselves to make the most of it. So this is a quote from Facing and Fulfilling the Later Years by Elsie Andrews. And it really does look at Quaker spirituality and coping with aging. So conscious approach to aging. So the conscious approach to aging is an attempt to integrate spirituality and awareness with an understanding of the emotional and cognitive changes that come with aging. It allows for an integration and acceptance of changes and considers that diminishments may create potential for spiritual growth. So conscious aging, it eschews a declinist view of aging, which is that we will live to a certain point of productivity and then just decline. And it also eschews a positivist perspective on aging, which is the, we used to call it the the surfboarding granny, or the 55-year-old tennis star approach to aging. So, some aspects of conscious aging, and I guess this gets really back to why do we pursue a spiritual path? Why do we engage in a spiritual practice? And certainly it is about increasing our self-awareness, increasing our self-acceptance, self-responsibility, and then assertiveness with regards to our values, and living with integrity and thinking critically about ourselves, our values, and the world as we live in it. So the developmental tasks of aging: completion, meaning, love, and acceptance. And those are really what I really wanted to talk about today and to get across to you is that spirituality and aging, it's really about approaching aging with this understanding of what are the developmental tasks of aging. And completion, attending to the settlement of outward affairs. So how do we consciously go about thinking of the completion of our affairs or the completion of our life? And that's not an easy thing to do. And you're all here this morning because you are practicing this spiritual practice we call Quakerism, which allows us to go within and to look really closely at what it is we're feeling, what it is we're thinking, and to connect that to spirit, to connect that to a transcendent value of spirit. But there may be times in our lives when we don't always practice that, or we may find ourselves in situation of stress and anxiety when it's hard to do that. So, meaning. Now, how many friends think of their life, think of the meaning of their life as a journey, but conducting a life review, recording and telling stories, finding opportunities to share wisdom, moving from aging to saging and recognizing yourself as an elder of your spiritual community, mentoring others by becoming a good listener and a wise one in your meeting. Now this is an interesting, so this is Elizabeth Gray Vining. O God, our Father, Spirit of the universe, I am old in years and in the sight of others, but I do not feel old. With myself, I have hopes and purposes, things I wish to do before I die. Now the interesting thing about aging, one of the more interesting things about aging is that we always feel to be who we are when we were 16. Or as soon as we came into our full adulthood. We feel that that's who we are, and you wake up every morning and you think, okay, well, I'm myself, and but then you look in the mirror and you see somebody else is there staring back at you. You know, first for men, it's usually your father, you know, and then eventually it becomes your grandfather, you know, staring back at you. But this notion of consciousness as being our awareness of what keeps going on, it lulls us into thinking that there will not be an end to that. That it's hard for us to imagine our own annihilation. It's very, very hard. And my own understanding of that is that we really are our psyches, our personalities, our architecture, that we are deep. We are an archaeological dig, so to speak. We're buried architecture. But this is one of the main factors in people seemingly taken unaware of their own aging. So love. Giving and receiving love. What about acknowledging our regrets? Becoming an elder and moving from aging into saging, if you will, so becoming the wise elder. And part of that is willing to love more than wanting to be loved. So acceptance. And as I mentioned before, this idea of existential loss of the end of our being, it is so, I've thought about it, meditated about it. It is so hard for us to wrap our heads around the idea that we will be forgotten eventually. But it is a good practice to think about it, to grieve for it. Emotional withdrawal from the larger role, from our larger role in the world. Acceptance of our eventual dependency on others and saying goodbye to the more. The idea that there'll be more life, that there'll be more this, there'll be more food, there'll be more, just everything will just keep going and we'll get more and more of it. But eventually that will end. And it's a hard thing to comprehend. The idea of the competent adult, or the tyranny of the competent adult, that I am a competent adult, I can take care of my affairs, I can get to where I need to get to, I can do everything that I need to do independently and with competence and assurance. Bill Thomas, the I guess geriatric doctor in Ithaca, he has a book called What Are Old People For? And he explores the idea of where we go when we age and how we change cognitively and emotionally. But he has this phrase that we live under the tyranny of the competent adult. We push our children to become competent adults in our culture. We want them to be independent. We give them all kinds of little tasks as they grow to achieve greater independence. And then when they reach it, when they're early 20s, and then, that we're so happy that they've become competent adults. And the idea of dependency, the idea of being part of a community that is working together to kind of decipher the mystery that is our being together, that is a support. Because there will come a day when you can no longer, or I can no longer be a competent adult. We got together some focus groups with various friends, and most of them, or I would say that maybe all of them said, well, I'm okay with aging, but I want to remain who I am. I don't want to have, and if I ever have cognitive decline, that's going to be the worst thing for me, because then I won't be who I am. And then I would say, well, then who are you now? We know from the latest neuroscience that in fact we construct a lot of this idea of who we are. The brain is constantly taking information in and constructing an identity, but that identity will become deconstructed, and then who are we? And then where's God in all of this? If we're not who we think we are, who are we? Yeah. So, the purpose of aging, and this, again, talking about community. The gifts of aging. So, deepening our spiritual life, having an outlet for creativity, and then connecting to community. These are the three essentials to aging consciously and in seeking equanimity and aging in a way that is remaining true to one's values and the integrity that has been part of our lives as friends. For many Quakers, when they get older and they feel that they're no longer as ambulatory, they often have an identity crisis. They think, well, my identity as a Quaker was being part of this community, and now I can't be a part of the community in the way that I was before. So where is my identity? Am I truly a Quaker? So the meeting's ability to reach out, to connect people, and to nurture that connection is certainly, an undertaking. So here's some queries. We finally got to the queries. What opportunities? Now here's one this is the one from Faith and Practice. How do I welcome the approach of old age, both for myself and others, as a time for wisdom, for detachment from the turmoil, and for greater serenity and attachment to the light? Yeah, so that alone time, just being alone, is that time for serenity. That really sums up the spirituality and conscious aging and attending to one's emotional needs through that greater awareness. Yeah. Now, final question, what about transcendence? So, our lives will end, and eventually will be forgotten. And for many, many thousands of years, most people coped with that by thinking of a transcendent value, something that lives on after they're gone.
Legacy.
Well, just transcendence. So as Quakers, we for hundreds of years we talked about transcendence as Quakers, but in this generation we're much more about immanence, about what's happening in the here and now. Earlier Quakers would have certainly looked at Scripture and talked about, well, we're part of a larger process, and we would probably say, well, we're part of evolution, right, or something to that effect. But what about transcendence? We've put all this energy into being alive. What will continue? And our Quaker values, the test, if you will, the testimonies, are transcendent values. They're values, the value of peace, the value of love, integrity. These values will live on way after we're all gone. And so it's another way to think about like our own demise, that someone, that was so beautifully put, someone may not remember our name, but they will behave in such a way that the values we put energy into will continue. And I was thinking earlier of what you were saying, because in Scripture, Paul says faith, hope, and charity, and charity being love, and love is the greatest because it never ends. And there's the transcendence of love. Well, thank you, friends. Thank you for bearing with me.